Thank you, Anela. Thank you, Christiana. Good morning, everyone. I'm Katrina Marsden. I manage the contract for the EU Large Carnivore Platform Secretariat. So we support the platform. We keep just talking about platforms, and by that we mean a group of stakeholders with different interest groups who come together to discuss a particular topic. The EU Large Carnivore Platform was established in June 2014. This was after several years of work together between different stakeholder groups and the European Commission. They had realized as large carnivores started to return to Central Europe in particular that there was a need to discuss together that the interests of different groups wouldn't be met by working separately. So this group came together with the mission to promote ways and means to minimize and wherever possible find solutions to conflicts between human interests and the presence of large carnivore species by exchanging knowledge and by working together in an open-ended, constructive and mutually respectful way. So a bit of a mouthful, but it basically means they wanted to work together to look at good practice examples across Europe. As part of the agreement, the platform, next slide please, agreed a number of principles as well. So to work within the EU legal framework, particularly the Habitats Directive, to respect the law, to ensure the necessary knowledge base, respecting scientific principles, to recognize socioeconomic and cultural considerations and concerns, to find solutions through constructive dialogue, and to engage in transboundary cooperation. As well as these key principles, the platform agreed on a way of working together so that the members would respect each other's views and listen to each other and exchange good practice in a kind of in a cooperative way. Next slide, please. The platform had initially 8 members. There are now 7. These include European Landowners Organization, who co-chairs the platform with the European Commission. There are 2 hunting organizations, FACE and CIC, the reindeer herders, who are particularly important in Finland and Sweden, obviously. IUCN, and IUCN is represented by their species specialized group, the Large Carnivore Initiative for Europe, WWF, and Europark representing the parks. Initially, there was also a farming member, Copa-Cogeca, but they decided to leave the platform. And now currently farmers are only represented through the European Landowners Organization. Next slide, please. The platform carries out a number of different activities supported by us at the Secretariat. These are divided into 3 main categories. One is communication actions, so things like sending out a newsletter and bulletin, using the website as an information exchange platform. And the idea is that this is being built up as a way to exchange information on large carnivore management across Europe and share good practice. There are a number of different meetings that are carried out, an annual meeting in May or June, and regional workshops, which are normally twice a year in different locations. Obviously, the last couple of years that's been a bit difficult, and we've moved more to online platforms. And then there is background research, which is commissioned by the platform members, and we carry it out as the Secretariat, and that's basically gathering information on good practice, on financing, and on existing other regional, national and local platforms in different locations. Next slide. So to say a little bit more about this particular part of the work stream, and this is also why we wanted to work together on this webinar. The EU platform can work together very well on the EU level. It's quite easy for stakeholders to discuss about large carnivores on that level, and also platform organizes regional workshops. But they found that it was more difficult to go into a situation in a region where there was a particular conflict related to large carnivores and have a kind of longer term discussion with stakeholders. And for this reason, the platform supported a project establishing pilots for regional platforms, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. In addition to this, the EU platform organizes regular exchanges with platforms at their main meetings, so including national and regional dialogues such as the wildlife delegations. We've carried out an evaluation, which we'll present later in the webinar, with the questionnaire, which many of you were kind enough to fill out on relationships within different regional groupings. And this year we plan to develop a toolkit for the establishment of regional platforms, which will be aimed at managing authorities and at life projects, for example, about how to establish platforms and how we can learn from each other's experiences. So now I'll pass straight on to Valeria, who will describe the regional platform pilot project in more detail. Valeria is also an EU platform member, as a member of the Large Carnivore Initiative for Europe, but also manages the regional platform project. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much, Katrina. Thank you for introducing me and also for introducing the presentation that I'm giving. I hope you can see it well. I can't see my screen, but I hope
we don't see your presentation. We see your screen, but not the presentation.
You don't see my presentation if I move it at the moment?
Yeah, now you have to move it a little bit more further to the left, I suppose.
Okay, this is a slide. You can't see the title slide?
No, we see your desktop.
Okay, sorry. Can you see it now?
Yes, now it works.
All right, sorry for this. Okay, so as Katrina has introduced it, the project that I am coordinating was promoted by the European platform on People and Large Carnivores, and is being developed within 2 contracts that have been issued. One started in 2018 and the other one in 2019. And they both last 3 years. So the first one has extended due to COVID limitations in order to continue our activities, and both contracts foresee 3 tasks. Task A, which is mainly the understanding of the situation and the physical establishment of a space for dialogue and participation of different interest groups in the management of large carnivores. Then task B foresees the implementation of proposals that are produced by the members of a platform. This is done as pilot using some limited funds that the Commission makes available, and these tasks are developed in parallel with some communication activities as part of task C. Now let's see, I will very briefly describe what each task implies, and where we are working and how far we have gone in each place. But I would like really to present what the process means for us. So task A, first of all, we needed to identify the locations. While for the first contract, we proposed the 3 locations to the Commission in Romania, Italy, and Spain. The second contract, it was the Commission who asked us to develop the work in the 3 locations that they had selected. This is the French Alps, Lower Saxony in Germany, and Sweden. Well, they wanted somewhere in Sweden and Finland, and we agreed with Sweden. So these are where the platforms have been established. What issues are we dealing with? In Romania, there is situations where bears that were managed through hunting For many years, in 2016, the ministry had banned hunting as a management options and allowed the use of derogations for particular situation. And this abrupt shift in management has caused some troubles in adjustment, but mainly this has resulted in an increasing number of occasions where bears enter the village and interact with human activities. In Grosseto, wolves in Italy, the wolves have always been there, but they've increased in the last 20 years, and so have increased its impact on extensive sheep breeding. Similar situation in Avila, in Castilla and Leon, in Spain, where wolves have been expanding south of River Duero, where management is not allowed, and this has increased its impact on a particular local breed of cattle that needs extensive breeding. Now the second contract, the situations are very similar to the ones that have presented in Lower Saxony, an increasing wolf population that increases impact on extensive livestock raising and also interacts with hunting activities. In France, where many activities have been already implemented and going on, but seen in an uncoordinated manner, and some of the damage prevention measures now clash with other uses of the landscape, while in Sweden, you all know that the increasing wolf population has led to some changes in the management, and also the presence of the large carnivore clash with some of the interests on the land, such as hunting and reindeer herding. Now, what we usually do, we hold a neutral role, whereby we do not enter in the participatory process, but we facilitate the establishment of a dialogue of a space for dialogue and exchanges between the different actors that we identify in the different situations. And of course, we try to adapt to the local situations. How have we implemented the process, the participatory processes, for example, in Spain, Italy, and Romania, where we have a more advanced work? We established the platform, where setting a clear objective through a mission, and then we held a series of workshops going through some steps, each one with an objective, but the outcome was the one that allowed people that held different positions not to convince or persuade each other, but to find positive points in common interest for developing a proactive, constructive approach, and propose some interventions that have been then ranked for priority according to criteria that the members of the platform have identified, and then some pilot implementations. Some of the actions that have been proposed can be directly implemented by platform members. You can see them in green in this list that I won't really go through. But as for some others, the participation of the authorities is crucial, and they cannot be implemented without a full buy-in by the relevant authorities. This has been a limit for the first contract, where we established the first 3 platforms, and we decided that with the second contract we wanted to avoid this. So for the 3 second set of platforms, we really wanted to make sure that the governments, that the relevant authorities were there and were fully supportive of the process, so that we could convene the platform members with a clear commitment, not only by them, but also by the relevant authorities. And this is how we went in the location negotiations for the second contract. So as you see in Sweden, we have not held the first meeting yet, but as Bernard will tell you later, this is planned for the near future. For the communication, this was developed at 2 levels, of course, at the international level, at a national or local level. At the international level, we needed to make sure that the progress and the continuous communication with the EU platform was maintained. And we update a session of the website of the European Commission, where you can find all the relevant information, reports of meetings, fact-finding missions, and so on. And then at local level, of course, this needs to be agreed with the local members of each platforms. So I hope this has clarified what our work foresees, and if you had any question, I will be here happy to answer. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Valeria. Thanks, Katrina, for this overview of the project. And now we would like to zoom in a little on the situation, or into the situation in Finland. And I would like to hand over to Marie-Lili, who is joining us from Finland today. And she works at the Wildlife Agency under the Finnish Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. And she and her colleagues manage the stakeholder processes related to the wolf territorial groups. Yeah, and so I would like to hand over to her for her to tell us a little bit more about the process of involving stakeholders in these groups.
Thank you, Christiane. And you can hear me all right, I hope.
Yes.
Great.
You just have to go into the presentation mode. Yeah. Thank you.
So, yes, my name is Marie-Lili and I work as a senior planning officer at the Finnish Wildlife Agency. And as Christiane described, we sort of govern or guide these territory cooperation groups that have been established to wolf territories. And first, I'll go into the background of how these groups started. So in Finland, we prepared for the update on the national management plan in 2014. And we organized different seminars and surveys and so on. And these brought a clear message that the local people really need to have more influence on the different wolf-related matters or wolf management in their own areas. And some of the participants suggested that we could have these cooperation groups formed by local people from different stakeholder backgrounds. And this was included as a measure in the management plan that was published a year later, and the groups were launched in 2016. And they have been active ever since, with an increasing number of them. And the working model is also, or developing the working model is included in the latest management plan. And of course, we have this Live Bora Wolf project running for 6 years in Finland now, and developing the actions or the working model of these groups is also included in this LIFE project. And then I'll quickly go through what are the main goals for territory cooperation. And primarily, we want to promote coexistence of wolves and people in the same areas. So considering which measures would be needed locally is key for what we need from the local people. And they also try to consider in the group meetings how to implement these measures. One of the key thing is to distribute information about the wolves in general, and especially of the situation within the specific area, so the locals get more up-to-date information. And also the groups need to combine different views on the wolf and their management. So when they get together, there's usually quite a wide range of views on the matter. So what we want is for the groups to discuss and sort of see the views of other people too, and sort of lessen the conflict that is existing between people. And then they represent the locals in wolf related matters, for example, as giving the assessment on the local wolf situation. And with these pictures, I'll try to present the topics that they can go over in the meetings. For example, the recreational use of the nature, or of course farming and raising animals, having livestock. Then there's the hunting or hunters, and for example in Finland and Sweden we have a very unique way of using dogs, far fetching or far moving dogs that are not necessarily close by to their owners when we go hunting. And then of course the sort of the availability of ungulates, for example, both for the large predators and the hunters, is an issue that concerns some people. At the moment, we have 30 groups, 5 of which are currently taking a break, so they are not active. And on the map, the green areas show where we have the cooperation groups, and then there are sort of these faint blue circles that show the estimated territories from last year's March 2020. Interesting, having these groups is very important, so that's what we see as the motivation that is needed to keep the groups going. And the decision to start a group is rests on the local people, so not the Finnish Wildlife Agency. We don't have an agenda here to sort of have a group necessarily in any areas. It's all about the local people and whether they see this action model or working model as a useful thing for them. There's typically 10 or a bit less members from different stakeholder groups participating in these groups, and they come from different backgrounds, so they can represent the game management associations. And we've set a rule that we only want 1 member from each, because sort of to have an even distribution and also leave space for other stakeholders, because the game management associations are very eager to participate, as obviously the topic of wolf management is interesting for them, and also there's the issue of having this financial support for participation. Then we have in several groups we have a police member, some representatives from village associations, for example, or the nature tourism part as well. And I'll then try to quickly explain how the groups work. So, well, just briefly going back to the map we have here, to say that the groups don't necessarily have to be on an active wolf territory. So it can happen that they have a pair or otherwise a regular activity of movements of wolves in the area. So that's enough to establish a group if the locals see that there's a need to have this kind of group. And yeah, so it can also happen that the territory is no longer there, but the group may still decide that it's useful to continue their actions. There's a framework of an annual plan to present meeting packages for the groups with 4 different themes or 4 packages, and this is really has been the core of of the territory cooperation so that the people get together and meet face to face. And obviously the current situation has made this quite challenging because not necessarily everybody has the skills or the equipment for the online meetings, but mostly I think the groups have managed this well, and we've had these windows where it has been also possible to have arrange face-to-face meetings in certain areas. Their tasks include assessing the local wolf situation and planning for different preventive measures. And during these meetings, the groups decide what they want to promote and take forward. And also they receive up-to-date information within the meeting packages. For me, as I am currently the coordinator for the territory groups. And for the foreseeable future, we have decided that the cooperation groups will continue their work. And as I said, they may also sort of decide to take a break if the situation in the local area is relaxed and there's no clear need for actions at the moment. And so then to the financial part, we have this decree that states that the actively participating cooperation groups or the game management associations participating get some money, and this can be used to cover, for example, meeting expenses. But really, there hasn't currently been any funding directly to the actions or measures, and that has been a bit of an issue. So it's difficult to plan, or the groups have focused on taking actions that require little or no financial support at all. Then, well, we have these criteria for the activeness, which is monitored annually through gathering reports from the groups. And I, as the coordinator for the groups, try to provide sort of topical information also outside these meeting packages and be available for answering questions and relaying messages or statements forward to, for example, game administration. And what I have seen is that for the groups to work, it's really important that they have this collaborative spirit and an open atmosphere for the discussions. So this really helps to keep the members motivated. As this is volunteering work, it really needs to be organized so that the local people see this form of action useful. And it's not always so that the groups work well or there's a good dynamic between the members. So from time to time we need to sort of, well, intervene is a bit harsh, but anyway, to sort of give advice and remind them how to have good practice within the meetings and keep a good dialogue between different members. Okay, I think I need to wrap this up really quickly. We had different type of actions taken by the groups. There's press releases in the local newspapers that represent or present the fact that there even is a cooperation group. And for example, that they try to promote that we have this DNA collection going on during the winters, and we need locals to report their large carnivore observations to these contact persons. And these cooperation groups deliver information also to local animal farms to, for example, tell them that there's these predator offense package materials available for them on application. And also they hand out these brochures. And some of the groups have organized public events for the local people to sort of share out information. And also they made state questions for the game administration or the researchers. and give statements or sort of written positions on what they think of on different matters of wolf management. And increasingly so, I think we are trying to promote the communication between different groups, sort of to develop this working model and yeah, share more information to local stakeholders to assure that all the people or stakeholders within the wolf territories know these relevant things related to how the population is managed and what are the roles of different actors and where to get more information and so on. And for example, I've put here a picture from the population estimate report that is provided annually by the Research Institute, which currently holds a ton of information, and not everybody or most of people are unaware of this package. So we are really trying to promote that we have this great material and people are welcome to it to go and read more on the topic. And then shortly about how this links to the Live Boreal Wolf project. So we will be organizing several seminars annually with the aim of increasing dialogue between different groups and local residents and stakeholders, and further continue this forming of new groups to new territory areas or areas that are lacking a group, but the locals would see this as an important thing to start. And also, the groups will obviously receive information on the project, how we are doing and what are our results. And as far as possible, we will try to sort of participate or take them included in the works of different working packages that we have in this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie. This was really, really interesting. Thanks for sharing these insights into the group processes in Finland. I see there is also already a question, but as I mentioned, we will get back to that in the discussion at the end. So now we are coming to Sweden, and I would like to hand over to Sarah Hommen from the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. Sarah and her colleagues from the SEPA are overviewing the process of stakeholder engagement in updating the large carnivore management plans in Sweden, and she also provides the link to the EU regional platform project, which Valeria talked about. Joining from Sweden is also Bernard Leroux, who will talk afterwards, and he is involved in the regional large carnivores platform project. Bernard is a facilitator specializing in conflicts related to large carnivores, and he has carried out interviews with many stakeholders and authorities in Sweden, and is also in the process of establishing dialogue platforms on the new management plans. But first, I'd like to hand over to Sarah, please.
Thank you, Christiana. Hi, my name is Sarah. I will quickly go through the orientation of how we are working in Sweden, and then I will pass it forward to Bernard to sort of give a presentation on the dialogue, the national dialogue. We have, okay, so I'm trying to share. There we go. We, like there, so. We have the governance system in Sweden consists of the Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation, the Ministry of the Environment, and the Ministry of Finance. And these three ministries, they support different kinds of authorities in Sweden. We have the Sami Parliament, we have the Swedish Board of Agriculture, which are represented then under the Enterprise and Innovation Ministry. And for ourselves, me working at the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, we are under the Ministry of Environment. The regional county boards, which have the regional like the regional authorities for the large carnivore management in Sweden, where also the management delegations are under the Ministry of Finance. So they have a broader mission than the Environmental Protection Agency. Therefore, they are under the Ministry of Finance. We also have a Center for Large Carnivore Information, which the SEPA, Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, give finance to. We also have a Wildlife Damage Center on a national level. It is connected to the University of Agriculture, SLU, and also gets financing from the SEPA, Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. When talking about, it was a really nice presentation from Finland, and when talking about collaboration and stakeholder involvement, we have a National Large Carnivore Advisory Board connected to the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. It is the same way also for the Swedish Board of Agriculture, but I will not show that here. The Sami Parliament has a lot of cooperation with the Sami villages. And the regional county boards have their wildlife management delegations, in which a lot of you are represented today. The county boards also have a lot of contact with the Sami villages in the areas where those are represented. They are in the wildlife management delegation. We have sort of the similar representation as in Finland. We have hunting interest, conservation interest, we have police, we have Sami questions, a lot of different ecotourism, and also in areas where you have fisheries, we have those represented as well. For a couple of years, we had a wolf committee. The committee was connected to the Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation and the Ministry of Environment. This committee does not exist anymore, but it was an interesting example on how the key stakeholders came together in a mission led by one of the county boards, I think, and sort of set up what are our common goals on this. We also have cooperation in monitoring. We have field rangers working at the county boards. The Sami villages work a lot in the northern part of Sweden in collecting and monitoring the large carnivores. Wildlife Damage Center collects all the information. We have a local cooperation with stakeholders, for example, hunters, farmers, conservationists, collecting scatter, for example, or being out tracking these animals. The wildlife management delegations are also involved in getting the results and the local picture of how the situation looks. The Swedish Hunting Association has had until now, at least, and will probably continue to have a different position in Sweden, where they have a lot of organized hunters helping with the monitoring and the observation of animals in Sweden. We also, I will tell you a little bit about how I'm working at the moment for with the revision of the National Management Plan for Large Carnivores in Sweden. So I'm project managing this process, and we have a lot of communication with the different stakeholders. We get information and a lot of communication also with the Large Carnivore Center for Information. We are cooperating with the Wildlife Damage Center as well, and we are working within the system, so to say, with all of these stakeholder collaborations that already exist. When talking about the dialogue for coexistence between humans and large carnivore, which Bernard will tell you about later, next after me, he has the ability to work above all of us in these different kind of authorities that we're working with. So in the large carnivore management process, where we revised the national management plan, we will not talk about the politics, for example. We will try to be as concrete as possible. Whereas Bernard has the possibility to discuss and to integrate a lot of voices which find the whole system being wanting to change the whole system, for example. Bernard has been talking now to the National Large Carnivore Advisory Board, which is connected to the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, and therefore we are a part in the dialogue, but we are also collaborating with making it possible to connect to all of these different people. And I think I'll stop there, Bernard, and you can proceed and continue with your presentation.
Well, thank you. Let me see if is my presentation visible? Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Right. So thank you, Sarah. I think you said I'm above. It feels like above and below. There are more possibilities to actually engage in dialogue through this particular project, a kind of freedom that is in fact something which is an advantage here. I'll try to be brief because I see we're running late. First of all, let me just say that Valeria said that we still have to clarify the objective. Right now, we've actually identified an objective which is really something that affects a lot of people, and that is the clarification of the legislation, the way it's interpreted and the way it's implemented. It affects people on a local level, but also national representatives are speaking about that as a real stumbling block. So the aims of this dialogue, just to break it down, is to work through existing groups and organizations. Sarah has shown very clearly that there are groups on a county level. There's a national advisory group, the Large Carnivore Council, and these groups exist. And the question then is, if the groups exist and the exchange is happening, why then are we still in a kind of escalating spiral of conflict? And that's been a big question from the beginning. So, but we have decided together with SEPA that we would work with existing groups and organizations and not attempt to create new ones. We have a very clear aim to contribute to SARA's process, the revision, or SEPA's process, the revision of the National Management Plan, which is currently underway, and we have regular contact with each other and try not to overlap too much. Now, the aim, and it was interesting to hear the definition of platform in the beginning, the aim here is rather than to get people together to discuss issues which in a way they're already doing both locally and nationally, is to see if it's possible to create a conversation that allows for important issues to be made visible and talkable. So to understand the problem, and then to have the kind of conversation where one can actually go a little deeper and not get stuck in the surface issues, which is often the case. It's also to create mutual understanding, and through that, when people are able to express what it is that they're feeling, both on a local level, but also on a national level, our premise is that in itself relieves the tension, makes it possible to establish a different kind of dialogue. So one of the things that has arisen for us during this period has been the need for ongoing platform and to think beyond project, to really look at platforms, and I put it in inverted commas, meaning another way of having this conversation, which is perhaps more effective. So our progress so far has been that we've really attempted to understand the problem and spent time scanning media, social media, reading various documents and research reports, speaking to researchers, but also conducting in-depth interviews with stakeholders in order to identify the conflict lines, which is because we're conducting this project on a national level and on a local level, it's important to understand where the leverage points might be and where one would start this dialogue. So we've had a number of exploratory talks, particularly with the Large Predator Council or the Advisory Council, to determine where the potential for dialogue is. And what came up there was, we need clarification. This confusion around how laws are interpreted and implemented is creating a lot of tension, and that's where they decided they would like to start. So there was an agreement to engage in a dialogue, and there are stakeholders for all the major, or representatives for all the major stakeholders. So the idea here is to clarification of the law, how it is interpreted on different levels, how it ought to be interpreted also legally, but also what happens when decisions on derogation are implemented. I just need to, my screen has gone blank. There, sorry. So what is really important and has been stressed in the interviews and of many of the national stakeholders have repeatedly said that it is really important that local voices are heard. And this is interesting because on a national level, there's a lot of discussion on a theoretical level, but when you speak to the reindeer herders, they will identify exactly what it is that they really are struggling with, how they receive different decisions from different counties when they seek derogation, for example. And the same is the case for farmers. So what we've decided is that we will focus in order not to start too big, we will start off with protective hunting as a derogation. And in fact, there is no difference in the Habitats Directive, but in Sweden, in Swedish law, there's the category of protective hunting, which is an issue which affects a lot of people. Now, tomorrow we will be having a meeting with lawyers from different stakeholder organizations, Sarah and myself, in order to at least find some clarity in the strict law. We will, in the next 2 weeks, in fact, on the 21st and 23rd of April, meet the national stakeholders to look at interpretation, to start off that conversation. We'll meet again with them on the 18th of May, but there'll be a lot of work being done in between. And our hope is that, and we've already received a willingness from the Environmental Protection Agency in the counties to engage with the Large Predator Council once they have really looked at issues of interpretation and why interpretation differs on different levels, in order to try and gain clarity. We've also secured the willingness of parliamentary lawmakers from the various parliamentary parties, with the exception of one, that they are willing to engage in dialogue with the Large Predator Council, SEPA, and the counties, and even with the ministries. At the same time, we are engaging in an attempt with all the restrictions that COVID presents us with, to reach out and hear the stories of local people and engage with the counties, considering both the derogations, but also how communication can be improved. And what we will be doing is then to continue exploring the continuation of this platform, or the idea of a long-term dialogue beyond just projects. So that was it from me. I hope that it was comprehensible at top speed. But if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Bernard and Sarah, for this context and for the update of the situation in Sweden. And we will now go into even more detail into the situation of the Swedish Wildlife Delegations, as Tassos Hovadas will present us the findings of a survey on stakeholder participation. Tassos works for Callisto, which is an NGO based in Greece, and together with Adelphi provides the secretariat of the EU Large Carnivores platform. And so Tassos will present the analysis of the survey, which was undertaken in 2019 and looked at different regional platforms, but especially focusing on Sweden. Okay, Tassos, over to you, please.
Thanks, Christiane. Could you please verify that you see my screen and you hear me well?
Yes,
fine.
All
That's
good.
Fine. So what was the background and the rationale of our survey? It was included within the contract of the EU platform, and we focused on multi-stakeholder platforms, concentrating exclusively or partly on large carnivores. This included the regional platforms within the EU contract, on which Valeria gave her presentation before, as well as Swedish Wildlife Management Delegations and the Finnish wolf territorial groups. We developed and administered a questionnaire, and in this presentation, we will see the first row of data collection and processing. We hope that a second data collection will follow after 1 year of operation, a full year of operation. Of course, we have now the restrictions with COVID, but as soon as we have this full year of operation, then we will go on with the second row of data collection. The instrument included several sections. The first one had items on socio-demographic characteristics. The second section focused on conflict, either human carnivore conflict or stakeholder conflict. We then had a section with Likert scale items, concentrating on impact, collaboration agreement, attitude change, and effectiveness of the platforms, in this case of the delegations. We had also a section on working relations and trust between stakeholders, and a final section on anticipated outcomes and concerns. So in terms of sample collection, we had administered the questionnaire to all participants in the EU contract platforms, as well as those in Sweden and Finland. We had 266 valid responses overall, after we excluded all responses with gaps. There was an impressive response rate from Swedish Wildlife Management Delegations. We had 159 questionnaires from participants there, from 21 delegations overall. This is more than 50% of the total sample, actually. And out of these respondents, we outlined 85 who were included in platforms represented with more than 8 participants. Actually, this is quite close to the number presented before with participation in these schemes by Maria. So we have this threshold for the final sample. And these participants were from 9 delegations. Let us move now to the results. We will start with the demographics. We have around 40% of female representation. This may not be the majority, but again, it's an impressive figure for female representation in this kind of schemes, in this kind of platforms. We have most respondents in the age cohort of higher than 60 years old. More than 60% have a university degree or postgraduate studies after the university degree. And a point we need to highlight is that almost half of the sample self-reported an income that was lower than the country average. In terms of synthesis, we have 22.4% members from environmental NGOs, around 20% from regional and local authorities, and we have also representation from producers, hunters, foresters, landowners, rural development organizations, and tourism organizations. So these are this is the affiliation of participants in the delegations. Now we will see two different slides in terms of conflict perception. Here we see 4 different delegations and the responses to 3 different items. The first item on the left is if conflict associated with large carnivores in the past year either decreased, remained the same, or increased. The second item has to do with stakeholder interaction in the region overall, if it was perceived as conflict, as negotiation, or as collaboration. And the last item has to do with stakeholder interaction in the platform, meaning in our case in the delegation. So this group of delegations, these 4 delegations, had a very big percentage in terms of conflict increasing, in human carnivore conflict increasing. And we had few responses of participants saying that conflict decreased. So in this case, we can see that despite the existence and the operation of delegations, conflict may be still increasing. What we can see in terms of stakeholder interaction in the region, we had 2 cases where the responses were split between conflict and collaboration. So here we have 2 extremes, either conflict or collaboration. When we had a clear majority of conflict, then this was most probably also reflected in stakeholder interaction in the platform as well. So conflict in the region and conflict in the platform, when it's over a percentage, covariates. In split responses in the first 2 delegations, then we had increased percentages for negotiation and collaboration. So this was more or less the picture for the first group of delegations. Again, here human carnivore conflict was increasing. And this is the second group of delegations. Here we have the stability with the highest percentages. In this case, we have human carnivore conflict perceived as being more or less the same in the previous year, in the past year. In this case, again, we had very few responses saying that conflict decreased. And we see that the highest percentages in terms of stakeholder interaction in the region were in favor of conflict again, with varying percentages, however. In terms of stakeholder interaction in the platform, we see that percentages for collaboration and negotiations were higher than the same percentages for stakeholder interaction in the region. So overall, what we can see is that platforms, delegations in the case of Sweden, provide a forum, a kind of space for more negotiation and collaboration as compared to the region overall. This is a first major result that we can discuss later on. In the next slide, we see participant responses in terms of the Likert scale items. So what we see is the mean, the average of the responses from -2, which is I totally disagree with the item shown on the left, to +2, which is I totally agree with these items. What we can see is that we have an agreement that platforms or delegations will have an impact in the region. However, participants were quite reluctant to see that collaboration or agreement can be easily achieved. They believe that it won't be easily achieved. They were also quite reluctant to see their attitudes changing. They believe that their attitudes either towards large carnivores or towards other stakeholders will change through the operation of the delegations. The last 2 points are quite insightful for our discussion because it concerns the local regional level and how it influences the effectiveness of delegations. Here, respondents saw that the operation of the delegations could not solve all problems and challenges at the local regional level. So we come back to issues already highlighted by previous speakers that underline this need for cross-scale collaboration and communication when it comes to large carnivores. A slide on working relations and trust. The groups that worked together included hunters, landowners, farmers, stock breeders, and forest managers, followed by scientists. We had trust co-varying with working relations. With exception of scientists, we had quite a big percentage in terms of trust. So what we can see here is that stakeholders can work together if they don't entirely trust one another, which is quite crucial, I believe, for the dynamics within delegations. A last point of concern is that environmental NGOs and local plus regional authorities appeared to work with quite few stakeholders, and they were trusted less than other stakeholder groups, which is again a point of discussion. I'm now moving to a slide with a kind of analysis. It is a correspondence analysis where we can see what are the most common anticipated outcomes. These are placed close to the origin of the two axes we see in the diagram. And these most common anticipated outcomes had to do with damage caused by large carnivores, either damage prevention methods or compensation of damage. Another common item was addressing issues with polled wolves, and the last one was increasing the scientific knowledge base on large carnivores. Apart from these common items, we were also able to identify through this analysis issues related to specific delegations. For instance, if you see on the positive part of the horizontal axis, you can see the Western Norrlands delegation connected with solutions that exclude lethal management of large carnivores, as well as solutions that are effective to address the problem bears issues. If we move to the positive part of the vertical axis, you can see the Södermanlands delegation connected with issues of recognition of the own stakeholder group as a main anticipated outcome of the participation in the delegations. And in the negative part of the horizontal of the vertical axis, we can see decreasing damage being connected more with the Östergötlands platform delegation. So this analysis allows us to see which items are more related to which delegation. It's quite insightful in that regard. And it also allows us to see the same thing with the concerns. So in this slide, we see what are the most common concerns of respondents. I'm reading on the right. The most common items were lack of stakeholder willingness to negotiate, conflict between stakeholder groups, which is remaining, not decreasing, lack of trust, and agreement between stakeholder groups not reached. Here we see a collection of problems that have to do with stakeholder interaction, actually. And in the biplot, in the correspondence diagram on the left of the slide, we can see again which items are related to which delegation. So in the positive part of the horizontal axis, we can see the Western Norrlands delegation connected to a concern that the moderators in this delegation could not establish a constructive climate, constructive interaction among participants. We can have many other examples. Let me just highlight the negative part of the vertical axis, where we see the Östergötlands platform, where tension either refueled or resurfaced either in the region overall or the platform itself through different developments. So this is another point of concern, that either we have moderators not being able to establish a constructive climate among participants, or that tension is resurfacing, re-emerging in time, which is, of course, an issue to discuss as well. I'm now moving to the last slides. Of course, we can delve deeper in any detail you would wish, but what are the main points of this first analysis of the first data collection we had? There was no platform where large carnivore conflict was perceived as decreasing as a major response. This is one first point. There was no consistent association between human carnivore conflict and stakeholder interaction again. Which means actually that in each location, we may have a unique context, a unique agenda to address. The third point is that when we have an increased large carnivore conflict, then we needed at least some level of stakeholder collaboration in the region before this can be seen in the platform as well. Another point was that the platforms seem to be a successful space where stakeholders can negotiate and collaborate. This is a very major aspect, actually. The last point on this slide is that participants expected the platforms to have an impact. However, at the same time, they saw little prospects for collaboration agreement, attitude change, and effectiveness. So the question here is, how can delegations be expected to have an impact if we do not see any chances or any big chances for collaboration agreement, change, effectiveness, etc. Here we have some hidden aspects, and of course we can speak with Bernard on that later on, but it's quite insightful to see that contradiction in the responses of participants. Moving to the last points of discussion, we see an issue with local authorities and regional authorities, as well as environmental NGOs, which appeared to be less involved in platform work and be less trusted by other stakeholders. We saw that the major anticipated outcomes were related with damage caused by large carnivore, which is actually a kind of collection of technical aspects. The major concerns on the other side related to stakeholder interaction, lack of willingness to negotiate, etc., which brings us to the need of environmental mediation. And the last 2 points have to do with what we can see as a follow-up of this work before the second data collection. Actually, this has to do with things that we can propose as a way out. We saw that each local context, its local delegation may have a unique agenda, and the point here is how to build on the anticipated outcomes and make them strengths, exploit them as strengths, and how to address the concerns so that they will not become weaknesses. So this is a way showing what locally can be done by the different delegations so that they have an agenda on their own, they can take ownership of the process and actually establish a continuation of their work. And to do so, we can use social learning templates to scaffold social learning. This is an approach that has to do with how we can see collaboration under existing conflict, because no matter what we will do, conflict will always resurface and come back in one way or another, in one version or another. But the big issue is if we can collaborate under existing conflict. So we can speak about several templates in that regard. I can also show you a paper we published with Callisto from our work in a Greek protected area in that aspect. So these were the main points. I would like to thank you, all the participants in that survey, because apart from helping us to conclude this regional platform evaluation, the results we have and the findings we'll have, of course, will be a very major point for us to consider and come back again to you with more insights of that regard. So that was all from me, Christiana.
Thank you so much, Tassos. I think this was really interesting and a lot of food for thought also. I do have a number of, I do have questions myself, but there is also a question in the chat, which I think nicely relates also to your last points. The question is, are there any good examples or local examples of good cooperation and dialogue between stakeholder groups in Europe that has solved conflicts? I'm not sure whether Tassos or Valeria want to answer that. Not an easy one, I suppose, but
I can take that up. Of course, Valeria can also respond.
Go ahead, Tassos.
Christiana, could I share my screen again? I think it's quite insightful what I will show right now.
Yes, okay, please.
Let me move back to the presentation because there are some issues here. For instance, could you please verify that you see my screen?
Yes.
That's fine. So let us see this Östergötlands delegation. Please excuse my Swedish. I'm trying to do my best. So we have this local context. Here participants, and it's the same participants. Here they said that the damage caused by large carnivores was decreasing. And they saw that as an anticipated outcome from the delegation. What we see in the next slide, in this Östergötlands delegation, in the same delegation and the same respondents, they say that tension resurfaces. So at the same time, we have damage decreasing and conflict or tension resurfacing among stakeholders. So what we see is a mixed picture. We do not have ideal situations here. We have a messy, intermediate kind of problem situation together with some progress. We have a negative aspect remaining and that should be addressed together with some good practice being implemented and some progress made. So we cannot see ideal situations. What we can see and what we can speak of is how can we build on this messy situation to give the ownership of that process to the local context, to the local stakeholders. And this is where I could speak more on these templates, but I can do that later on if needed. I will let now Valeria go on with responding to that question.
No, very quickly. I mean, for the experience that we had within the contracts with the EU in the first 3 platforms, we have certainly initiated a process, but it is of course a long-term process, and within 3 years we cannot certainly solve the situation. What we have reached is a much deeper understanding of the positions of the different stakeholders and the issues that affect them. They often, in the places where we worked, they had often not talked to each other because they had some preconcepts. You know, they judged themselves as opponents and did not want to talk to each other. So in this respect, we certainly have made some progress in that we have made them understand each other and agree that they all wanted to get to the mutual objective that they agreed upon.
Okay, thanks, Valeria. I think also Bernard can say something about that.
Yeah, just to add on to what Tassos said, this messiness, that different things are happening on different levels. What is quite striking in Sweden is that there are many positive examples of progress, of good communication, good things happening. But then there's the whole media and social media conversation that's happening that somehow infects even the best initiatives, because there's a whole different thing happening. There's a whole different dynamic there, and it's a real concern also that, you know, that there are different levels of conflict happening at the same time, and in some areas the good is not really being seen.
I'm muted. Yeah, that's an interesting aspect, the role of social media in that as well. We have another question in the chat to Tassos. How do you understand trust? Is it a shared expectation of future behavior of those involved, or consensus about the general goals, or commitment to collaborate?
Yes, thanks, Juha, for that question. I would single out the first and the third point. Actually, what we see is that we don't have a fully fledged consensus, actually not within the same stakeholder group. It's much more difficult to see it among different stakeholder groups. So what we can achieve is agreement on concrete points to work together. So I would say that trust is actually a kind of climate that allows collaboration on concrete points, on concrete agreements to fulfill certain goals. But I would not say that it's a fully fledged consensus over all aspects and all stakeholder groups.
Okay, great, thank you. Maybe I have a follow-up question as well. So, I mean, you have focused on the situation in Sweden, but I would be interested to compare this also to other countries, especially, of course, those where pilot project platforms have also been established. Can you say a few words about that? What is the differences or the similarities?
Can we see a couple of diagrams? It will take us a couple of minutes, actually. Is that okay, Christiana?
Yes, please.
Okay, fine. Could you please verify that you see my screen?
Yes.
What we can see in this diagram is actually the report we submitted to the European Commission from our work in this first set of data collection. And it's a comparison between the EU contract platforms, the ones actually run by Valeria in the contract, and only the 3 of them, the platform in Italy, in Spain, and Romania. These are figured here by the blue color. And with the red color, we see the responses from Sweden plus Finland together. So it's the result from the item focusing on human carnivore conflict. The question is, which answer best characterizes your experiences regarding large carnivores in the past year? The conflict decreased, increased, or remained the same? So the blue color is the EU contract platforms. Here we see conflict increasing up to 80%, and it's actually a validation of the selection of these platforms to be included in the contract in the first place. So they should be included because conflict is almost 80% there, acknowledged by participants. With the red color, we see the existing, the non-EU platforms, which are the delegations from Sweden and the wolf territorial groups from Finland. What we see here is that we have a much more increased percentage of stability in terms of conflict, as well as a slight percentage of conflict decreasing. And if we now move to the questions regarding stakeholder interaction, again, blue color EU contract platforms and red color Swedish plus Finnish schemes platforms. Here we see, especially if we focus on the last point of collaboration in the EU contract platform, we see collaboration to 0. It's non-existent in the region. Whereas in Sweden and Finland, we see some collaboration, although it's up to 20%, but it's recorded and it's significant. If we now move to the situation within platforms, we see many more opportunities for both negotiation and collaboration. So what we can see is that in the existing platforms in Sweden and Finland, we see some possibility of human carnivore conflict decreasing on one hand, and on the other hand, we see some possibility of collaboration between stakeholders as well as the propensity to negotiate, which is also expressed in the blue color as well in the EU contract platforms. Again, the point is that both in the, let's say, older platforms as well as the new ones, the ones that were established under the EU contract, we see that platforms offer a space of discussion, of negotiation, of collaboration within the local context, which is much more constructive as a climate than the one existing in the region overall. This is, Christiane, more or less the major points in this comparison between EU contract platforms and the ones existing in Sweden and Finland.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tassos. I think we have time for one more question before we will come to an end. And I would like to take the opportunity to ask Valeria also whether it's possible to draw some factors that are necessary, factors that are necessary for the success of a regional platform, but also what are really the factors, the aspects that need to be in place and that need to that are likely to lead to a change also of attitudes and to a decrease of conflict?
It's a particularly complicated one, also because it really depends on the situation that we find in the place where we want to work, we decide to work. As we have heard during this webinar several times, every situation is a particular one, and even within the same country, the local situations might change. What needs to be taken into consideration, and this is particularly relevant for authorities that decide to engage in such a process, is that they know where they start from, but they don't know where they will end up to. So there is a certain degree of uncertainty that needs to be taken on board, and an openness by the authorities to accept the work that has been done by the group members, and openness by the group members to really listen twice, listen to the others, and then share without any preconception, their interests, and be genuine. I think genuinity is one of the most important factor that needs to be really there among platform members. Maybe, Bernard and Tassos, who have facilitated many other platforms, can add other suggestions.
Thank you, Valeria. Anyone else want to add something to that? No? Tassos?
I'm afraid I will have to share again, but it will be quick, if I may. Christiana, it's up to you.
Yes, sure. We still have a couple of minutes.
Okay. Coming back actually to the first question, if there is any example of good practice, and again, we cannot have ideal situations, that's for sure. This is a paper from a Greek case study where we implemented 3 different social learning templates. Actually, social learning means that stakeholders create an agenda, create a plan, and work on it through resources that could be mobilized by them and by actors that could facilitate and foster the procedure. It's quite close to what we heard about Finland, and quite close to what actually is happening in Sweden. But let us see how this could be further facilitated and promoted through a kind of toolkit. So the question is, what is the toolkit that could be used, employed, so that stakeholder collaboration could be constructive? Again, far from ideal situation, but still constructive. So we have actually, this is the area. It's in northern Greece with bears. This is what we did here. We started with a SWOT analysis, actually focusing on the local context. So we have strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we outlined the in-group aspects having to do with each stakeholder separately, as well as the intergroup aspects that have to do with interaction between stakeholders. And this was a kind of stakeholder analysis we used as background information, quite crucial for moving to the next stage, which was what we say a mixed motive perspective. And here we negotiated not only the benefits, not only the good things, not only the, let's say, the win aspects. We also negotiated the costs, the negative aspects, and that was quite crucial for creating commitment and increasing trust between stakeholders. So I would say that negotiating both benefits and costs is quite crucial for opening this opportunity for local stakeholders to own the process. And the final stage was a kind of scenario development, a participatory scenario development, because in order to plan something and to start implementing it, you need resources, you need a time plan, etc. So this was made together with local stakeholders. Actually, this was in the frame of a live project, so we have already some resources from the project itself, but nevertheless, this is again a trajectory of actions showing how we can use this toolkit to structure and scaffold the stakeholder interaction at the local level, as well as what we call social learning, which means that through interaction and collaboration, stakeholders learn things and actually use them as additional strengths in their subsequent new interaction later on. This is more or less the rationale of this toolkit.
Okay, really interesting. Thank you, Tassos. So I think our time is over and we will draw to an end here. I think it's been really interesting and stimulating, and I, for my part at least, learned a lot of new different perspectives and issues that came up. So thank you all very much for your participation, for your interest in the topic, and of course for your interest in trying to find ways of coexistence with wildlife and large carnivores. And a big thank you, of course, to our speakers for sharing your experiences and your insights. So if you are interested in the topic, you can always look at the website where there is a lot of resources and publications, etc. Maybe I post it in the chat, or maybe Katrina can do that. And we have an email address, lcplatform@adelphi.de. You can always send your questions or your input to that email address, and then we will try to answer it or also forward it to one of the speakers. And also this webinar will be posted on that website under the events section, and also the presentation of today's webinar. So you will be able to find everything there as well. Okay, and I think with that, thank you all so much for joining. Have a nice rest of the weekend. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.